Hi, this is Misha, and this is a bit of a viewer request, looking at the Federation so-called fighter, also sometimes referred to as the Peregrine class. And this does kind of occupy an interesting place in Starfleet, the Federation. But it actually maybe fits better than you might realize. To that end, I also brought out the model of the Starfleet Academy flight training craft here, which predates it, and the runabouts here, but it has its own episode, but I might reference it once or twice. Alright, before we get on to the fighter, I thought it might be good to notice and talk about this ship here. The Academy Flight Trainer was only seen in the Wesley episode, The First Duty, where it was being used by cadets for kind of aerial flying. It seems to be a training civilian craft, not dissimilar to what the U.S. uses and has used for a long time. It is sublight only, capable of atmospheric and space flight. It must be capable of impulse because we see it going from Earth to Jupiter, which, if it were sub-impulse, would take a long time. As I've said before, I don't think people realize how big space is. It's big. It's a one-person craft, and that's about it. But we see the Academy using this for training purposes, at least for pilots. It's about 12 meters long, and as you see, quite wide with the wings. This really only appeared in that one Next Generation episode. But I brought it out because it kind of informs that the Federation did have smaller craft. Now the fighter, or Peregrine class, here, really started off life as a courier. It was a light courier, or cargo transport. Basically, it could hold a few people, or some small but valuable cargo, and get it there quickly. This is warp capable, unlike the flight trainer. It's about 25 meters tip to tip, so not small, about twice the size. Has a standard crew of 2, a pilot and a co-pilot, or pilot and navigator. It can carry additional personnel on the back. It does have a small transporter pad or room. It is capable of pretty high warp 9, give or take, but impressive for its size. That's a cat, by the way. Did you hear? And as originally created, it was armed with phaser array in the front. So just a little defensive phaser, and of course shielding and speed. However, it was weaponized by the Maquis as early as 2370, who added all kinds of disruptors and other beam weapons to it, whatever they could get their hands on, as well as torpedoes. Hello, Nummy. Please go. I do not need your help. So after that, we know they could be armed and reasonably effective because it was fast and maneuverable and capable of warp, so it could zip in and out and very effectively harass bigger ships. Sure, if it got hit, it didn't have a whole lot of chance, but keep in mind, sensors and targeting scanners of the day were mostly calibrated for much larger craft and much slower craft at warp. At impulse. We see this quite often used by the Maquis, but then when the Dominion War begins, we see the Peregrine class attack fighter used by Starfleet. And they would launch these in waves. Now they too would upgrade it with more weapons capability. They would maintain the phaser array at the nose. They would also install pulse phasers on the wings. And 2 to 3 torpedoes or torpedo launchers. And they could even be armed with either photon or quantum torpedoes. So even if they can only hold a couple of quantums, that's still pretty good firepower, plus the pulse phasers and phaser array. And these were used in waves to harry larger ships, and to kind of combat things like the Jem'Hadar attack fighter, and the Hideki fighter patrol ship used by the Cardassian Union. They could operate independently, or they could be launched from larger vessels, for example, the Akira class. Usually we do see them operating in space. Now it's worth noting that when it was in the courier role, it had a cabin in the back, but when it was upgraded with weaponry, it seemed to mostly just have a cockpit, so it was definitely more like a fighter or a small bomber. And while it seems pretty much a cannon fodder ship, and a bit of a suicidal ship, it did have certain applications. Keep in mind, the Dominion War saw smaller vessels like the Defiant and Sabre class compared with pre-war vessels like the Galaxy. And actually, it's a little bit bigger than the runabout here. The runabout is about 24 meters, but most of it is length. It's much narrower. It is taller, though. This is a much flatter ship. And of course, much of its rear is engine. So habitable space is smaller inside. So there you go. I hope that the couple of you who asked me about the little fighter, that was good. As far as the Eagle Moss model, the Academy I'm okay with. I bought it on sale, cheap, so the wings are polymer, the body is metal, the bottom is polymer. It's a very plain design, but that's how it was in the show, so what can you do? But now the Peregrine fighter, though, I really like. It's mostly metal, with the engine parts, the smaller parts being the polymer. And it's just a neat little critter, in my opinion. It's also worth noting that in a Voyager display, this is referred to as an Academy training craft, which is probably a display error for the production team, but it would make sense if this was a impulse trainer. This could very easily be a warp trainer, or, courier for half a dozen cadets, what have you. It was a multi-role ship used by a lot of people, and we'll talk more about the Maquis use of it before the Dominion War. I'm going to do a Maquis video eventually. But yeah, so that we would share this while I had a few minutes free time today. Any questions or comments, please, I welcome below. If you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.